Recording now for others who aren't able to make it. Okay, so the idea of this was that, you know, some of Griffin and Kat's relatives and friends, they wanted to know more about what they're doing and what their faith is, and so we discussed the idea of having a weekly meeting. I'm feeling now that maybe it was a little ambitious, and maybe I should have planned on just having like one kind of condensed introduction. I don't know, but anyhow, here we are. And what else was I gonna say? I can't remember, but let's see. You know, I mean, last week there were a few others, and they all seem genuinely interested. Maybe everyone's just a little busy today. I don't know. We'll see. We'll play it by ear, see how it continues. And so last week we just had introductions. We were just sharing something about ourselves and what brought us here. And so today I wanted to begin in earnest and try to give some presentation of what our faith is. What is Krishna consciousness? It is known by different names. First, we can maybe mention that. In the world, people most generally, they know us as the Hare Krishnas. Amongst ourselves, we'll generally refer to our faith as Krishna consciousness. And then if we're being more kind of technical about it, then we might say Gaudiya Vaishnavism, or what else might we say? Sanatan Dharma. There are different ways in which it may be referred to, and in a how can we say this, in a let's say in an encyclopedic sense, then our faith, it appears under the umbrella of what's called Hinduism in the world today. And actually the word Hindu, it doesn't have so much meaning. It was a name that evolved out of the civilization that developed on the, I think it was the Sindhu River. And really what it refers to is persons who follow the ancient Vedas, you know, which according to the scholars, historical scholars have different calculations. I think some date them to be 3,000 years old, others date them to be 5,000 years old. But we consider them, according to our estimation, understanding, calculation, we consider them to be the oldest body of religious or spiritual knowledge to be found in the world today. And these Vedas, they are vast. There isn't anything that really compares to them. In one lifetime, it would be difficult to get through them all. The Vedas are a compilation of many different writings by different sages, which are addressing not only spiritual concepts and teachings, but are also giving a way of life, you know, giving a way to live in the world in a very practical sense. So within the Vedic, what's the word? Anyway, within the Vedic writings, you'll find everything there. You know, there's advice on politics, government, agriculture, family life, medicine, all kinds of things. Many of you, well, not many, there's a few here, but Ayurveda is, of course, yoga is something very well known today. That comes from the Vedic text, but then also Ayurveda, you may have heard of, is also relatively well known. You know, that's the Ayurveda, you know, Veda, Ayurveda, that's in one of the Vedas. So it's a very complete body of knowledge that covers all aspects of life, material and spiritual. And so sometimes the knowledge is classified as as Paravidya, which means spiritual knowledge, and Aparavidya, which means material knowledge, knowledge which is helping us in this world in a practical way. So there's this clear understanding in the Vedas that there are these two sides to life. That there's the material aspect, which is in front, facing us every day. But then there's also a more subtle plane of existence, which a progressive person must also give attention to. And then within that sphere of spiritual knowledge, there are different levels of understanding that are presented. There are there's a gradation in the conception of the highest spiritual ideal. And so this is to say that Hindu is a very broad term. Hindu could mean many different things. There are many different paths which come under this term of Hinduism. I might have mentioned last week, but this Mark Twain, famous American writer, he made this very nice comment that when it comes to religion, India is the millionaire. There's one expression, what is it? Jay Mat? Yata Tat Mata, what is it? You remember, Griffin? Yata Mat Tata Pat, something like that. But this is one Bengali expression. What you think, that's your path. Because whatever you believe, you can actually, like for every conception in this world, you can find some parallel within the Vedas. You can find an origin within the Vedas. So it's such a broad body of knowledge. And every mentality is accommodated there. One of our gurus, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he commented, he made this nice analysis that every action in this world is based upon 4 impulses. And he described the lowest impulse or lowest motivation being fear. So to do something because you're afraid, and these we can look at these impulses, we can look at these motivations in the context of religion. Like why do people practice a spiritual life or religious life? So if we take fear, this is the lowest reason why someone would worship God. So for example, you're going to go to hell if you don't accept Jesus as your savior. This kind of idea. Not to. I'm not attacking Christianity at all. Just taking that as kind of as an example you can probably identify with. It's something we've all heard, right? We also that idea is also found within the Vedas, because see, this is dealing with people. This level of instruction is for people who otherwise would just do nonsense or do terrible things, like a very naughty child. The mother will say, don't do that or I'll slap you, or you're going to be grounded, or you're going to lose your pocket money, or you're going to be in trouble, because they're not able to understand higher truths, because they can't understand the value of just living a good life, just being good for the sake of being good. Then you have to kind of twist their arm a little bit, and give them some motivation of fear to do good. So this level of understanding is the most base level that is accommodated within the Vedic scriptures. You know, there are approaches, there are conceptions that are, you know, tailored for that particular mentality. The Vedas take a very broad approach, like something like a step ladder system that can raise someone from the lowest level of consciousness to the highest level of consciousness in a gradual, in a step-by-step way. So fear, this is the most base motivation for which someone will do something in this world. And then our Guru Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he describes the next as being gain, prospect, you know, to, you know, the idea that I'll get something if I do this, you know. So within the context of religion, it will be, you know, if you worship, like the prosperity gospel is maybe something you've heard of, right? So, you know, you'll be rich, you'll have everything you desire if you're a good, you know, God-fearing member of society. If you remember God and you serve God, then you can expect to get whatever you want in the world, you know. And prosperity is a symptom of having God's grace, you know. So this idea is also prevalent within the Vedas, and amongst the general Hindus, it's a very common idea, and it has its place because it creates some type of like regulation, you know. It helps people who otherwise might just do nonsense live like a basically good and decent life, and to make a connection to divinity, you know, even though it's mixed with selfishness. There's a link, there's a connection to a higher plane of life. So it's helping people who otherwise would just live a completely selfish life, you know, make some link to divinity and have some basic level of decency and goodness in their lives. So these are the two lowest levels of motivation: fear, prospect, and then the third is duty. To simply understand that, you know, that one should do good for the sake of good, one should do right for the sake of doing right. And then in the context of religion, you know, one would have the concept that, you know, by nature, you know, I am God's child, you know, God created me, the Lord, the Almighty created me. And therefore it's natural that I will offer my worship, offer my devotion, and there's no question of me expecting anything in return for that. You know, it is simply, that is the normal way to be, you know. And it's interesting because, you know, you can look at you can look at the contrast of different mentalities, and someone who's on that platform of understanding, they'll even be insulted if someone offers them some reward, right, for what they've done. You know, if you're living in that spirit of good for the sake of good, if you're living in that spirit of duty, then if someone tries to give you something in return, it won't feel comfortable, you know, because you weren't doing it for yourself, you were doing it for the other person, you were doing it for that cause. And so it can even feel like an insult if something's being offered in return, you know. You know, like you see, like also in loving relationships, that can manifest as well. Like you've given someone a present, and if they immediately say, oh, what do you want for that, then that will be painful. Like, I was just doing it because I love you. I don't want anything in return. That's it. My joy is in giving to you. So selfless duty. This is the third level motivation. And then the fourth is love. because duty, sometimes duty can be a little dry. If we're doing something out of a sense of duty, there can be a, stoicism and about that. There can be a sense of abnegation, tolerance in a kind of dry sense. But in love, there's actual joy, there's delight, simply in giving or in doing something good and offering something. So all of these different ideas, the different levels of understanding that are presented in the Vedas, they can be classified as tailored to the understanding of these different groups of people. And so what we are following, Krishna consciousness or Gaudiya Vaishnavism, it belongs to that category of love. And this is why within, let's say, within the context of followers of the Vedas, or within the context of Hindus or Indians or whoever we're going to say it's a small percentage. Because the ideal is simply to live a life of loving service for the Lord, neglecting the ideals of this world, neglecting any ideal of selfishness, to embrace our eternal identity as spirit souls, who exist to serve and to love, without any ulterior motive at all. So I was on a plane ride a couple years ago. I met a very wealthy Indian man, who he came from a Brahmin family also, which in the Indian caste system is the highest level. So like a wealthy, cultured. I didn't think he was super cultured, actually. I think he was spoiled a bit by all his money. But he came from this cultured background. And he was sharing different experiences he had, like in meeting different spiritual gurus and different paths. And he was describing like different impressive feats that they could perform. Like there was one who could, anyone who came in front of him, he could make them enter a state of hypnosis, just like automatically, because he had some mystic power. And you hear of these persons who can manifest things in the air, and they can do these kind of impressive things. And he was speaking like in this mood of like it was like he was approaching religious people as kind of like clowns at a circus, in a sense, but like as people who can impress you with something, people who can excite you with something. And that's what spiritual life is about. It's something that will give you like some buzz, or you'll get something out of it. And I told him, well, our conception is simply that we want to live a life of love and service. Our ideal is very simple and very pure. We're not trying to have some like candy for the eyes or the senses. We just want to live an authentic life of love and simplicity and service. And then he told me, he was very straightforward, and he told me, well, you're never going to get many people with that. Like, that's never going to be very popular. So in the Vedas, you find it, because it's mixed. It's mixed. There's one example given, that when a father wants to give his child some medicine, then he may mix it with some sugar. If you have some bitter bitter syrup, some bitter concoction, then he might mix it with some sugar to get his child to, because if you just give the child the straight bitter, you can't reason with the child. You can't explain to the child, this is very good for you. You just have to make it something that will be palatable, that will attract him, that will be tasty to him. You can't explain why this is good for him. You just have to make it something enjoyable, and then he'll swallow it. He can't take the straight medicine, but he'll take it if it's mixed with some syrup. So in the same way, the Vedas, they take this kind of approach. Chant this mantra, make this sacrifice, make this charity, worship this God, and you can expect to get this in return, or you can expect to avoid this issue, and so on and so forth. There's this mixed understanding that's there, because the pure thing is too much for most people. So the general ideals that are given in the Vedas, like what are described, and this is applicable, as I said, you really find in the Vedas a parallel for every conception in this world. So I'm saying the Vedas, but you can find these ideas everywhere. So the Vedas, they generally advocate the 4 ideals of life as being dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. And dharma here, dharma in different contexts can mean different things, but here dharma means living. Dharma means here duty or religion in a kind of stereotypical sense, in more of an external sense, religion. And then artha means money, wealth. Kam means sense pleasure, pleasures of the senses. And then finally moksha. So the idea is that the first 3 things, dharma, artha, kama, or duty, money, and pleasure, they are all things that will help us to enjoy our lives in this world. And then moksha, the 4th one, means liberation. And so that means to become free of the entanglement of this world. Because there's a basic understanding that this world is a reactionary plane. It's a world of karma. What you sow, you will reap. To every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So whatever you enjoy, whatever you take for yourself, you're automatically creating a reaction for yourself. And there's also the basic understanding that this is a world of samsara. Samsara refers, you might have heard of, samsara refers to the cycle of birth and death. Because there's a basic understanding that there's the body and there's also the soul, and the soul is distinct from the body. And so the soul is transmigrating through different bodies, because karma cannot be played out. The reactions to our activities, good and bad, they cannot be played out in only one life. So as you're producing karma for yourself, you have to take on future births in order to pay for that karma, so to speak. And that may be in a human body, that may be in an animal body. The Vedas recognize conscious everywhere. We understand movements to be a symptom of consciousness. So anywhere where there is movement, that's an expression of consciousness. And the more movement that is possible, the more developed the consciousness is. So for example, in trees, there's recognition of consciousness being in plant life. But the consciousness is not very developed. And so they are largely immobile. So there's this basic understanding in the Vedas that there's a what's the word? There's a I can't think of the right word, but there's a division, that there's a disconnection between body and spirit. And so therefore, while we are catering to the needs and desires of our existence here and now, in the back of our minds, we also have to think, well, what about next birth? You know, what am I creating for my future birth? And ultimately, what is desired is this moksha, the fourth attainment that I mentioned, to get out of the whole thing, to become free of the whole thing. And some followers of the Vedas will be more focused on that, and others will be kind of like, oh, later. Let's just focus on enjoying our time here in the most efficient way possible. You know, we were just talking about this a few minutes ago, how, you know, you see these big corporations exploiting people, and we were talking about like technology that costs $5 to make, and then they sell it for $100. But what they don't realize is they have to pay for that in the future. You know, it's not that you can get away, do things like that and get away with it. You will have to pay for that in the future. So we were discussing how the, you know, general Hindus, they know how this system works, and so they play the system. You know, so they'll enjoy as much as they want, but then they also know how they can mitigate the reactions to their enjoyment, and how they can also ensure, like depositing money in a bank balance, how they can have enjoyment in the future as well. So that, you know, all these things are described in the Vedas, like how the system works, and you know, they'll do things like give lots of money in charity. So a lot of charity will be motivated by this, that, you know, if I'm giving this money, then in the future I'll get it back. You know, or there will be worship of different demigods, motivated by this idea that I'll get some credits that I can spend in the future. So we were joking, you know, like if you want to do it properly. Like, you got to know how the system works, otherwise you're going to have to pay big time in the future. Here's my water. So mostly people are more focused on these first three: duty, money, pleasure. But then those who are a little more sober, they also consider this fourth ideal of life, moksha. How can I get free of the whole thing? Because I know that the pleasure I get in this world, it's based on the experience of the body and the senses, but that's not who I actually am. You know, I'm actually a soul. So what's the use of collecting all this energy and pleasure in this world when I'm actually a soul? Better that I just try to get free of the whole thing. So then there are other sections in the Vedas which are promoting this idea, and giving advice as to how one can just become free of this whole entanglement in the first place, and you know, as a spirit as a spirit soul, as a spiritual entity, to enter a world of spirit, to enter a world of consciousness and spirit. So these are kind of like two different lines of thought in the Vedas. But then there's a third one, and that is the approach of love, which we touched upon earlier. And then here enters the fifth goal of life. You know, generally these four goals that we mentioned, they are very widely known and celebrated and focused upon in the Vedas and by Hindus. But then there's a smaller section of persons who advocate this fifth goal of life, which is prema, or divine love. That actually the pursuit, we can look at it in this way, the pursuit of enjoyment, as well, the pursuit of enjoyment in the name of satisfying our senses in this world, as well as the pursuit for liberation, with the idea of becoming free from this world. In a sense, these are actually two sides of the same coin. Why? Because they're both based on selfishness. They're both based on individual consideration. Whereas the approach of the third school of thought, of the approach of love, or the prema dharma, the religion of love, the conception there is that our problem is we need to put ourselves out of the center. The real necessity is for us to recognize that we are one part within a whole. Our necessity is to understand that we are living within an organic whole. And by organic, I mean in the traditional sense, an organism that is comprised of different parts that are all working together. So if we look at the human body as an example, it's comprised of so many different, it's not just like one sheet of skin or blood or whatever, it's comprised of many different organs, many different cells, which are all working together for the good of the whole body. The heart's pumping blood, the kidneys are filtering, and so on and so forth. The lungs are bringing in oxygen. So every part of the body has a particular part to play, and which they're playing not just for themselves, but for the good of the whole. So, if we look at the natural environment, then we get clues as to how, what is like the natural flow of reality. What is the normal expression of reality? We get clues in the natural environment around us. If we look at how an ecosystem works, that every element, every aspect has its own particular contribution to make. So this is why the world is a mess right now, because we Homo sapiens decided that we are the center of everything, and we want to reconstruct the world to suit our little ideas of how it will comfort us, how it will please us, and that was done without much foresight, to say the least.
Yeah.
And so things are kind of collapsing right now because of that.
And then we're asking ourselves why.
Yes.
I understand.
So we find these clues in the world around us and how natural systems work, that it's not meant to be about one entity, it's about a collective whole. So this is the approach of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is the final Vedic scripture. There's so, as I mentioned, there's many. There's the four principal Vedas: the Rig Veda, the Atharva Veda. Anyone remember the other? No. Yeah, Yajur, Sama Veda. These are the four principal Vedas. Then there's also the Puranas. There's 18 principal Puranas, but there's many more. There are the Upanishads, principal 108 Upanishads, but there's more. There are the Itihasas, means histories, which are quite famous. You may have heard of Ramayana and Mahabharata. So it's a huge body of literature. And then the very final, these texts we can add, it wasn't just one person who presented it all, but it was actually channeled by many different sages. And then there was one particular sage who's known as commonly as Veda Vyas, who did the work of organizing it all, compiling it for the benefit of future generations. In particular, because the Vedas describe different ages of time, and it's a cycle. It's a cycle of 4 different ages, which is continually revolving. And so in previous ages, persons were much more advanced, physically, mentally, intellectually. And so everything happened just through oral transmission. There was no need to put anything into writing. But as this current age approached, approximately 5,000 years ago, then there was consideration, like this age of, it's called the age of Kali. This age of Kali is approaching, and we know that these people, they're not going to be so developed, and so their memories will not be very sharp. So that was so they considered, we need to put this down in writing, so future, for the benefit of posterity. And so it was this sage, Veda Vyas, who took that responsibility, in particular, to compile all these different bodies of knowledge and organize it and systemize it. And he did this work. And then he came to the point of realizing he had not shown a clear path forward. As I mentioned, there are many mixed ideas in the Vedas. And so he realized, I've given many ideas to suit people who aren't ready for the straight truth, so to speak. But for people who are very, earnest, very sincere, very hungry for like the raw thing, I haven't given anything for them. And so then he came to write the final text, the final scripture, which is called Srimad Bhagavatam. And so this text in particular is promoting this concept, this idea of living a life of pure love, without, not mixed with any, selfish motivations. So there in that text, Srimad Bhagavatam, this concept is, this way of life is discussed. This understanding that we need to put ourselves out of the center. We need to understand we're living within a whole, and to recognize what is the actual center. And so in that text, Lord Krishna is described as being the highest expression of divinity, and as being the real source of fulfillment, love, beauty, joy, these innermost hankerings of our heart. Let me see. I'm wondering if I missed. I think I might have gone off my line of thought.
I'm sorry, I've got to go because I've got
okay. We could end here. We could end here. I don't want to overload you.
No. I don't want to be disrespectful, because a lot of what you were saying just went straight here, and it's just like I don't know, that feeling was just like right into the heart. And I don't know, thank you so much.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear, Gabriella. Lovely to have you with us.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and sharing all that beautiful knowledge. And I'm sorry that I had to cut my time short.
No, it's fine. I was just thinking that maybe I will end here. 40 minutes is, I think it is plenty. So, yeah. Okay, Gabriella, have a lovely evening.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Pleasure to see you again.
You too,
And pleasure to meet you, Melanie. Bye.
See you, Gabriella.
Okay, well, maybe I'll stop there. Yeah, I'm still kind of approaching the subject.
It's been really, really interesting. And the 4 levels was fascinating. So I'm really keen to hear more. But
Okay,
it is.
cool.
Mm,
Cool, wonderful,
mm,
wonderful. Okay.
mm.
Well, very, very happy to have you with us.
Yeah. So do you think you'll do this weekly, or what's?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was
Mm,
the. I mean, if the interest is there. I mean, if you're into it, I'm into it.
okay. Well, it's been really interesting. You know, I've heard about Hare Krishnas and never had any idea. I didn't even know that it was part of the Hindu religion.
Oh,
So it's
really?
been really, yes, I know, so ignorant. But the Vedas, I'd kind of heard the word, but really didn't know what it meant, and so
Uh-huh.
fascinating. I'm going to go and Google, have to do some reading about them and how old they are and all that sort of
Cool.
stuff, because it sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's funny, because people, they do tend to have this idea the Hare Krishnas are like this like random like cult that just sprung out of nowhere. One of my friends told me that they were out on the street once, and um they like maybe they gave like a flyer to somebody on the street and told them, oh, do you want to hear more about our philosophy? And the person on this who he met on the street said, oh, you have a philosophy? Like that just blew. They just thought that the Hare Krishnas are people who just like to dance and jump in the street. Like the idea that they actually had like some type of theology, that just blew their mind.
Well, it's blown mine as well. And it's really interesting, the parallels with like Plato and the idea of trying to live the good life, and being in the cave and distracted by shadows on the wall, which seems to have some, I mean, they're not related to each other, but it's some parallel about what are we here for, and what are the things that we should ideally be striving for, and what does it mean, and how does it work. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you'll
And
find
it's
there's
lovely to know
parallels everywhere. There's parallels everywhere.
that.
I mean, the way we see it, this is reality. This is truth, and so it's natural that everyone is touching upon it in different ways and approaching it in different ways. It is one truth that is seen from different angles and from different heights. We were discussing yesterday. I can never say his name, but how do you say it? Nietzsche. Griffin's gone.
Nietzsche.
Nietzsche. Yeah, I
Nietzsche?
can't say his name.
Yeah, that
But
guy. Yes.
he's into nihilism, right? But so ordinarily you wouldn't think to connect him with our line of thought. But there's actually many parallels in his ideas, because he's I think he's a sincere seeker. He's truly seeking something, but he didn't have access to a higher level of knowledge. So according to the knowledge he had available to him, he drew particular conclusions. But in his search, he also touched upon many strands of truth. So there are many parallels. You might have heard of Max Muller. He was it Max Muller? I can't remember. But one German philosopher and scholar who did a lot of study of the Vedas, and he commented that the Upanishads, which is just the Upanishads are a section of the Vedas that are they have a kind of prestigious place amongst scholars, because they're dealing with purely abstract spiritual truths, whereas, as I mentioned, a lot of the Vedas is dealing with things to do with our day-to-day lives. And so the Upanishads are dealing purely with spiritual truths. And so this Muller, he made this comment that that one drop of the Upanishads, just one, and that in itself is a very, you know, it's a big section of the Vedas, but it's just one section. So he said one drop of the Upanishads can feed the whole world. That he said persons of every religious inclination, of every different religious inclination, they will find something there in the Upanishads, something to, you know, if you strip away like prejudice and cultural trappings, and you just try to look at like what is the knowledge being given here, then it, you know, there are very universal things that are discussed. But people tend to, you know, they get stuck on the external aspect of things, or a particular different dress or different food, and then they're seeing it as something very strange. But if you strip that away and just like look at the ideas and look at the concepts, these are very universal conceptions that anybody can appreciate. So yeah, well, it's really, really wonderful to hear your appreciation.
Well, thank you for your time. Like I said, I've really enjoyed it and found it so interesting. And I'm so glad that Griffin's enjoying it as well, and Kat. Good place to be, especially in Italy.
Okay, well, maybe I'll let you go back to your cooking.
Right, lovely to hear from you, and look forward to the next one.
Cool, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, bye for now, Melanie. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Okay,
See you, Griffin and Kat. They're still there.